Hey, welcome to Hey Sis, I Need to Vent. I'm Poesie.
And I'm Tracy.
It's been a minute. It's been a while since we've even done an episode or just even interacted really. And I feel like so much has been happening in the world, not only with COVID, but with this resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that we've been seeing on social media, in the press, a lot of conversation happening about race. And I know that we all have such different feelings about it. I know that for Black people around the world, seeing what happened to Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd probably triggered something in you and in me. I know that it triggered a lot of feelings, and I'm pretty sure, Tracy, for you can relate. I mean, what's happening to the world?
Girl, it feels like one disaster after another, you know? Everyone came into 2020, hey, the year of change, the year of perfect vision. COVID got us all up in the lockdown, and then Ahmaud Arbery was shot when he was jogging, and I'm just like, ooh, wow. And then just a couple of weeks later, you hear that George Floyd was murdered by a police officer, and you're like, yo, this world is not a safe place for Black people. And, you know, one of my goals this year has been to be more pro-Black and aware and loving of my melanin. And, you know, with everything that just keeps happening, it just keeps blowing my mind away of how Black lives really don't matter in certain places and how inferior people see us. And it hurts to the core, girl. 100%. It hurts to the core.
100%. It's like another, I think it's interesting. We can get into it a little bit later as we're talking, but then coming from Africa and growing up in Africa, I grew up in Zimbabwe for a time and then moved to England. But when you are in Africa or in an African country, you're surrounded by other Black people. So a lot of these issues are never an issue. Like a lot of the issues that people are encountering Black people are encountering in the Western world are never really an issue. You hear about racism, but actually you maybe never experience it because Black people are the majority where you are. And then fast forward to moving to like the Western world or moving to Asia like you are, Tracy. And every day you're reminded of the color of your skin. And every day you're reminded that you're Black. And for me, seeing what happened to George Floyd and seeing the Black Lives Matter movement like firing up again, it's just yet another reminder that I'm Black and my life. So for some people, my life doesn't really matter to them. Some people don't even see me as a full human being. I think that's been the thing I've been trying to, that I've been processing and trying to get my head around, if you know what I mean.
I know what you mean. I definitely know what you mean. But what I'm going to say is, hey, let's just talk about growing up Black in Africa first before we even talk, and correlated to what's been going on in the Western world. Because, you said that you grew up in Zim and then you guys moved to the UK. And I grew up in Botswana pretty much all of my my youth, right? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, you will say that racism didn't exist. I'm going to say racism did exist, Kwiti. There was that, no offense, guys, I am not anti-white, but there was that white man who would be looking at you, but in your head, you're like, who do you think you are? This is my country, type of thing. And you'd grow up hearing that, America is such a violent place, and Black people are in gangs, and there's always a Black person who's disappearing or anything, and you're just like, yo, not my problem. In my part of the world, it's safe. So what I'm going to say about growing up in Africa is it's not that racism doesn't exist. It's just that we have created a mindset. I'm going to speak for myself, but I've also spoken to a majority of people. But we've created a mindset where if it's not your problem, you don't get involved.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. Everyone knows that Africa has a history, obviously, of colonialism. And in countries like Zimbabwe, South Africa, and
apartheid.
Apartheid existed. Black people were treated a certain way for a very long time. We had to fight for our independence. But I think why I say racism is less so, whereas in our history, the racism was overt, it was really direct. The white person will call us a kafa and nigger. Very, very direct. but post-independence, especially in countries like Zimbabwe, and less so in South Africa, I think racism has become more nuanced. It's become a little bit more covert. That yes, there are those white people that are out there that feel that they are superior. They walk around acting like they own the whole country. But then that also goes into what racism is, and that also shows a lot of their privilege. Because one thing that I've learned, especially during this period, that racism isn't just about somebody calling you a nigger or somebody calling you a kaffir or people not letting you into places or whatever. Racism is really about privilege and power and privilege in a lot of ways. For you to be racist, you need to have power and privilege. Not only do you need to believe that your race is more superior than others, but you also need that also comes coupled with that power and that privilege. In Africa, it's like that power and privilege is prevalent in the white people that you see, then even Indian people that you see, that I have to say, who can also be racist to black people. Because they're the ones who... And Asians, yeah, they can, like Chinese, we know all about Chinese racism in Africa. But like, the reason that they can do it and the reason that it's obvious is because there's that power and privilege. But then you only experience it if you are interacting with them a lot. But then let's say for the little village boy who's growing up in, I don't know, Bambazi, in Plumtree, where there aren't that many white people around you, where do you really experience racism? You know what I mean? Like, it's not, it's not something that you'll directly experience, is what I'm saying. So, and you never ever feel the fact that, oh, I'm black. You know that you're black, obviously you know that you're black. I think the legacy of colonialism in all our countries has made us very conscious of our blackness, and you know that black people were always not treated well, and you maybe associate everything that's good, success and everything with whiteness, but then you'll never ever use the word racism. You know, that's not the language you use, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Most likely you'd use maybe xenophobia, you might use corruption, you might use nepotism. But yeah, right. When it comes to like power and privilege and also, you know, just injustice and overall in countries, not necessarily, like in some countries, you wouldn't necessarily run to racism as your first reason for oppression. But I would want the viewers to weigh in. Like, let us know what's happening in your part of Africa. Do you agree or disagree? Like, I get you, and you are right there, girl. I agree.
Yeah, no, but then, like, yeah, like we're saying, essentially, coming from Africa, your view is a lot different. And I always say that I never realized that I was black until I moved to the UK, because all of a sudden you become othered. You're an other. You have to take a box that you come from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background. You need to always tell people in a form that I'm black African every single time I complete an application form or anything, or just have some sort of diversity form put in front of me. I always have to identify exactly what are you, you know? You go to school and people are asking you, oh, where'd you come from? Oh no, where do you really come from? You know, that's like those are questions that people ask you all the time. Or if you say, oh, my name's Joanna, they're like, oh really? But is that your real name?
What's your African name?
Exactly, because they're expecting an African name. So the fact that you're black becomes like the thing that identifies you, even before your name. Your color is what identifies you. And I think that is something that you get more in this part of the world than you do like in Africa itself. In Africa, you're a person first before, you're a human being first before anyone looks at the color of your skin.
That's very true, girl. When you put it that way, when I think of all the things, like when I look at how I have been experiencing being black in Asia, you know, with the Asians, especially with the Taiwanese, I'm not going to say too much about other countries, but with the Taiwanese, they're very respectful people, but there's always that look of, she's different. There's always that amazement, like, wow, the fascination. It could be fascination, like, oh my God, what? Or it could be like shock, or it could even be disgust. Like with the older generation, I'm not going to lie. I think the other day I was crossing the road to go to work, and this man was sniffing his fingers. Don't ask me what he was sniffing. And I looked at him and I was on the phone, hey? And then he makes sure he's looking at me. And then I looked at him and I then turned away and I saw him from the corner of my eye and he spat like, and I'm like,
oh gosh.
Not my problem, fam. Not my problem whatsoever. But you will come across a person here and there who does things like that. But for the most part, I'm going to be honest and say it's mostly fascination. Like, oh, where are you from? You catch people sneaking looks at you. I was in the elevator again recently, and this man took a picture, but he didn't turn his phone sound off, so he heard a click, and then he was going off on the 8th floor. I was going on the 7th. So when we get to the 7th floor, he gets out of the elevator on the right.
But wait, I hope you made him delete the photo.
Girl, that's the thing. Like, people will take photos of you. Like, they will ask. Yeah.
That's the thing that I don't like. I know that's curiosity, but then where do you draw the line between curiosity, rudeness,
and respect,
and respect, and even racism? Because yes, they're curious. They've never seen a black person before, but if you're doing that to them, because it's not like you'd ever seen a Taiwanese person before.
All right, but here's the thing, Kwitse. Like, I hear what you're saying about like it being disrespectful, and I'm not trying to justify this, but think of it this way. Growing up in Zim or growing up in Botswana or whatever country, when a little white person came or an Indian came, you'd be like, that kid is different, yo! You know, it's that type of thing. It's just that you need to be mature enough, or you need to have enough exposure. I'm also going to get up to ignorance on that part, as to not having been exposed to exposed to different cultures / races. So I'm not going to be too offended, because it's more so out of I don't want to say a good place. It's more so out of an ignorant place. But one thing I am going to say is what I have learned growing up here, because not growing up here, working here, is that it's not my responsibility to make anyone feel comfortable with my blackness.
100%.
Does that make sense? For example, I used to go, like, when I would walk on the road, I would like always keep it in, because I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. If I'm crossing the road or anything, I would, make sure I'm behind people so that they don't feel like I'm gonna come up and like jack them or anything. When I'm walking in the I'm just like conscious, like, okay, let me not intimidate them. And that's the sad thing, when you have to realize that just because I'm black, people are gonna be stereotyped, or they're gonna feel a certain way towards me, but they don't even know me. I think that's when it hit for me that being black is a thing.
What you just talked about there are like the different ways in which racism can manifest itself. And then people talk about the 4 eyes of oppression. And what you just talked about there, when you were saying that actually I used to be really conscious of my blackness, and I used to make sure that I make myself smaller when I'm in certain spaces so that people don't feel some kind of way about me. But then what that is actually internalized racism. And that's one thing that people that's one of the 4 eyes of how racism manifests. So with internalized oppression, people of color and like black people, we internalize the negative messages that are said about us. Like, people in the media, we see so much negative imagery about black people. Black people are criminals. Black people are loud. Black people are wild. Black people are savages. They're ABC. Every single day, Tracy, you open a magazine, you open a newspaper, you just watch a film. Black people usually they're not in a position that's admirable. They're not in a position that people would admire, or even you as a black person would want to be in yourself. And we internalize all these negative messages about ourselves that it leads us to not even being able to bring our whole selves out into the world. And we do things like what you just talked about right there, that actually I have to make myself smaller. For me, my one thing is that I don't want to be called an angry black woman. So every single time that I'm speaking, or every single time, especially at work, in the workplace, you're saying when you're in a meeting and you don't agree with something, I have to think like 5 times how exactly I'm going to show my opposition to something in a way that's diplomatic, that's measured, watch my tone, and even watch my body language to ensure that it's not interpreted as aggressive, or I'm not interpreted as that angry person. I remember one time really vividly where it was one meeting. There was something that I absolutely did not agree with. And I think that was the first time that I really came out of my shell and just really spoke out. Afterwards, my manager sent me an email to say, "Is everything okay with you? You came across quite aggressive in that meeting." I was so taken aback, Tracy. I was touched to the extent that I went round to every single other person in that meeting and asked them, "Guys, do you think I was aggressive?" and
having to
everybody says
justify
no.
your feelings and your emotions.
I had, girl, so there's a lot in what you've just said. And seeing as we touched on that 4 eyes of oppression, another one is, I guess, it's called, well, ideological oppression, which is that white savior pro complex. That's sort of like what we touched on a lot earlier when we were talking about the history of colonialism in Africa, and the fact that white people, even Indian people and Asians who are still there, they have this messiah complex, and they also have this idea of superiority. And a lot of that comes from that white savior complex. Is this like inbuilt belief in them that their race is more superior. And I think this I guess ideological oppression is really prevalent because people will be believing, especially white people, that sometimes they're more intelligent, they're harder working, they're stronger. Like there's certain stereotypes that are built around that superiority, that the fact that they're more intelligent, they're harder working, they're stronger, they're more capable, they're more noble, they're more deserving, they're more advanced. And it's like a really, I think maybe a good example is that even black people, we can sometimes see them as this as well, because that's what we're so used to seeing, that we see ourselves as under them. In Zimbabwe, when somebody becomes successful, people will be like, Wamurunguka, which means you're now a white person. To the extent that even people who work for you, your domestic workers, will call you Murungwangu, like my white person. Because
in Setswana, we would say lekwa laka, like my lekwa basically means my white person, like, you know, lekwa la me, my savior. Facts. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yes, that's it. And that's that ideological oppression, and it creates these, I guess, positive stereotypes for white people, and we believe them as black people, and we've internalized so much negative messaging about ourselves that when we see white people, we associate everything that is good with whiteness, like
to the sense that we even lose elements of our culture because we want to imitate that whiteness so that we're seen as superior.
And I know, Tracy, you've touched on this previously, that even your dad, he always encouraged you guys to speak English. And that was just him. Guys, speak English. Speaking English will open doors for you. And to the extent that, like, he will say, oh, sorry, I'm not going to tell you a story, girl. I'll let you tell it.
No, it's okay.
So by him saying that, in a lot of ways, like, it's a parent wanting the best for his child. But then what's the actual message that he's sending to you as a child as well?
That's very true. And the sad reality is he was right, because of oppression that we have in our minds as to being black is inferior. Like, dude, this thing goes deep. And I think I want everyone to have a moment to reflect on how much they have, what is the word? How much they have internalized such things and they haven't even realized it, and how they feel that blackness is inferior. I'm going to keep going with these words. Like, I'm having some breakthroughs just from this conversation as to how much I have been taught to not appreciate my blackness and where it's stemming from. And it all makes sense. And it's really sad.
100%. It's just this, this ideological, that they believe that they're better, and they have channeled marketing campaigns, like, you know, the volunteers that they send out to Africa and everything. They're always in a position of privilege. So we have ended up internalizing the fact that actually we're just not as good. We're not as good as them. And it's really sad that
that's true.
We believe that. And a lot of, like, I mean, come on, you speak to, like, I feel so sad sometimes when speaking to young people in Africa, and when they say, but you guys are so much better, you know, at least you guys are like with white people, or white people, they're sorted out, they know what they're doing. But then I'm always like, but do you realize the power within you? It's so sad. It frustrates me, you know.
That's the thing. Like, it frustrates me because you've been aware all along. With me, it's mind blowing because I'm realizing how much we have suppressed ourselves to not appreciate ourselves. Because even when you give that example of, like, black people back home saying, you know, at least you have the privilege to be amongst the whites, and yeah, you know, you're going to succeed and stuff. What saddens me more so, or what blows my mind, is like what people picture blackness to be. I had this opportunity, like, I teach English, right? and I was teaching grade 1, grade 2, and it was a story about driving around in a game park, and one of the words I was teaching was Africa, and the Chinese was there, and they're like, one kid was like, "Oh, I love Africa. It's so cool. There's so many different animals, and it's really big, and it's nice, and it's awesome." And these other little kids are like, "I don't like Africa. It's very hot. There's no food. It's just like," basically they were like, Africa is a struggle place, you know? And when I sit back and I realize even the ideology that these white people have about us is so warped.
It's just all the images that are out there about us as Africans, as Black people, as Africa as a continent is so negative. This one kid, all they knew is that Africa's got loads of animals. But what about the richness of Africa, like the beauty of our people, the diversity of Africa, the different languages that are within Africa, the history of Africa? People know people have such an obtuse view of Africa, of Black people, because that's the view that's beamed out to the world by Hollywood, by like the news, by
standards, by the leading Western world countries.
100%. The people who set the pace of what culture is are basically pushing out negative images of Africa. So how will anybody ever think anything positive for us, let alone little kids who are in Taiwan? What do they grow up knowing? What do they grow up understanding? They even, because of those images that are being beamed out and that perception that they're building, they grow up with that internalized superiority.
Hold on, girl. Do you know which image? Let's let people know what image we're talking about. I don't know if you have the same view of the image, but it's the one where there's that kid who has malnutrition and they're going far to get water, and that's sipping water with little bony ribs. Shame. And then it's like,
and then the fly.
And the fly. I wanted to say it, but I held myself.
Don't forget the fly. Don't forget. Not to say that that's not a reality in some African countries.
Not to say
there isn't poverty. No, it's true. There is poverty in Africa. But guys, what else is there? There's a lot of other beautiful things that we can also be showing. We can also be showing those people in empowering positions, because that's the whole thing. Like, I work in charities, right? And I work for one of the biggest humanitarian charities in the world, the British Red Cross. And it is so sad to me, and it sometimes really doesn't sit well to me, because actually I work for a charity that is actually, or an NGO that's really complicit in often perpetuating that messaging around that negative messaging and negative imagery. I know that a lot of work, like, credit to my colleagues, a lot of work is being done to change how we tell stories of the people that we help, to change how we show the imagery of the people that we help, so that it's more empowering, so that it tells the whole story. Because, like, Tracy, you'll never understand the power, like, you know the power of a single image. Like, I'll never forget, we were sort of doing a campaign. We went to an advertising agency, and to help us to deliver this campaign, I believe the campaign was about flooding Bangladesh. And what they did was they just showed us a picture. They're like, "Oh, this can be your flagship image for the whole campaign. This is the face of the campaign." And it was just this woman in a sari standing there, no smile, just staring into the camera, and they just cropped into her face, and that was it. No story, no nuance, no nothing. So what does that picture tell you? That picture doesn't tell you anything about her, doesn't tell you even about whether she's in need or not. But then based on the color of her skin, obviously donors and people who are giving will just assume, well, she's a brown woman in a sari, so she must be poor, so we need to give to her.
First instinct,
exactly. And it could be the same thing. How many times have you seen a picture of a little black boy maybe playing football, and then it says donate? There's no story. There's no nothing. There's nothing.
That's true. But sensationalism sells, girls. Let's just be honest there.
It is, but then it's so sad. We're just not getting the right stories. But then that's like what we're talking about. I feel like it's leading us into like a really natural way in terms of like into this systemic racism, because all this overt racism that we've lived with has obviously naturally led us to this systemic and structural racism that we're living with right now, which is the more obvious one these days. Well, not obvious because it's covert, but then it's really in the structures and in the systems, in the workplace, you know. I guess is that institutional racism that is usually found, which is perpetuated through societal structures. You see it through the laws that are enacted. You see it through who can access resource and access opportunities in the criminal justice system, like we're seeing in America and other parts of the world, in the lack of access to jobs. I mean, this institutional racism, it's, I think a more obvious example is one that you also kind of have experience with, Tracy, is around recruitment. The fact that if you have a more, like in England, for instance, like this is a proven fact, if you have an ethnic sounding name, like if I had Kwitsemang Makanda on my CV, I'm less likely to get a job interview than if I just put a more like Joanna Makanda.
That's
because
true.
People have, because of this ideological oppression and this internalized privilege that people have, they also have unconscious bias. So when they see an ethnic name, they'll be like, "Oh no, that's an Asian person. I don't want to work with an Asian person," or they already have preconceived ideas of what Asian people are like or what Black people are like, so you won't get an interview. And I know that you had a similar experience when you're applying to jobs in Taiwan.
When I was applying, girl, I think I got over 50 rejections. And the thing is, I was told basically it was because I was Black. So when I came to Taiwan, I came through, what do you call that? I forgot what it was called. I came through an organization. Thank you. Let me not blast them. I came through an organization that was doing an internship. There we go. And I had to have 2 interviews. First was going to be with the organization's people. And then the second interview, if I was successful, was supposed to be with the hiring company, of course, right? So the organization was basically like a recruiting agency. Let's just call them that. So the recruiting agency, I would have successful interviews. They're like, wow, mind blown. Oh, you're so cool. Whoa, Thailand, China, Japan. You know, they're like, oh, China. They're like, you're really nice. Yay. But then once they had to go to the organization that was going to hire me, they would just be like, we're so sorry. They have said that they're not going to be able to accept you because they don't know how to explain you to the parents. The parents have a preference of a blonde hair, blue-eyed person. And then the other one was just like, you know what? And you could tell that these kids in this recruiting agency, in quotes, were so frustrated because they were like, I can't believe these people are denying her just because of the color of her skin. And I was just like, wow, hey? And then it came to a point where when I was sending out my, when I was sending out my resume to different people, because this organization is international. When I was sending out to the job that I got, I had told this girl who was in charge of it, I was like, hey, my name is Tracy. I have gone through this many rejections based off the color of my skin alone, not even on experience or anything. So before we even proceed with the project, or before we even proceed with the interview, could you please ask the hiring company if they will take me because I'm Black? Because I'm at that point where I'm tired. I'm tired of being rejected literally because I'm Black. And she was like, no, whoa, that's okay. Hold on. We'll talk to you. I had an interview with them. They were amazed. And then they chatted with my ex-boss. And she was just like, no, we're going to give you a chance. And she was like, I'd like to know your story. What's been going on? How have you been doing? And I'm like, I have been rejected by over 50 companies based off of majority the color of my skin. And she was like, I totally get it. I was Taiwanese and I went to school in the US. Mind you, this is someone who at least has, exposure to different cultures, right? Yeah. She's like, she went to school in the US. And when she finished in the US, she then went to teach in Shanghai. And she herself had experienced oppression based off of her nationality, because sadly there are tensions between Taiwan and China, which is just, a whole conversation for another day. But she understood. It took her being empathetic and actually understanding what I was going through for her to give me a shot.
Girl,
and then if you say that institutionalized racism is not a thing, I'm just going to say flat out, that's a lie. I 100% agree with what you're saying, that people are not getting jobs based off of institutionalized oppression, based off of the color of their skin.
100%, because let's be honest, institutions have human beings working in them. If the little kid who you're teaching English right now in Taiwan has grown up seeing negative imagery of Black people and of other races around the world, of Black people in Africa, of Black people in general, Black people are criminals, Black people are loud, Black people are dumb, Black people can't do nothing. That little kid is going to grow up with that messaging. That little kid one day is going to be sitting at the back of a desk having to make decisions over who to recruit. When a Black person's name comes up to him, or a Black person's CV comes in front of him, all that internalized, all those stereotypes, it's going to be the first thought that hits him. Because let's be honest, because like when we talk about internalized oppression, it's not just internalized by Black people, but like there's an opposite to that. There's internalized privilege. This is the one that people don't even talk about. Internalized privilege is sort of like that acceptance of that belief in the inherent inferiority of another group. So it's that it's basically believing that another group is inferior to you and then for the most part, that's because of the images that you've seen. So there's absolutely no way anyone can say institutional racism doesn't exist, as long as there are human beings within that organization and there are human beings who have grown up in this society that we're living in, which is so negative and toxic. Of course, there's going to be some institutional oppression. Yeah, definitely. And just on the subject of institutional oppression, the other thing as well is that I'm seeing, especially in the workplace that I'm in, is that it manifests itself through who even gets if you look at senior leadership positions. I tell you, after a certain level, it gets whiter and whiter as you go up. As you go up those levels, as you get to the CEO, you get to the directors, you get to the managers, it is a very white up there, girl. There is just no color. There is no representation. There is just maybe there's one Black person, and then you see one Black person in our executive leadership team, and then there is, but then it gets very Asian for the senior leadership team and some of the managers, and then all the Black people. It's like there's this glass ceiling at level 4 that we just can't break through. And there's a lot that we can talk about representation, and the fact representation really matters, guys. It's important that as Black people we see other people after Black people of color in senior positions, so that we've got something to aspire to. If we don't see that, then what do we have to aspire to? So that's another part of institutional racism, that it actually affects how people progress and who's at the top, really. Yeah, and I guess the last I of oppression is the one that really gets me. This is the one that bothers me the most, and it's that interpersonal racism or interpersonal oppression, and this manifests itself in those racist jokes and harassment and microaggressions, and that's the covert racism that is socially acceptable in a way, if you know what I mean. When people talk about this, usually it's the kind of racism that people say, oh no, it was just a joke, they didn't really mean it that way, oh, it's not that serious, and it comes out as things like people come to touch your hair, people commenting on how your food smells, calling other people names. There's so many different kinds of it, of these little microaggressions that people go through, or people coming to you. I always get this, people come to me and be like, oh, do you like Stormzy? Stormzy is a UK very successful Black sort of grime artist. I don't listen to grime music.
I know him.
Black, you know him, but people assume that because I'm Black, I listen to Stormzy. And when
I've definitely experienced.
Yeah, well, you say you don't, they experience shock. Yeah. That's the thing about having conversations. You learn a lot, but I'm realizing that I've experienced a lot of interpersonal oppression, because, for example, the hair touching, of course, here in Asia, if someone gets close enough, especially little kids, and I have one little girl who will come and stand next to me in games, and she'll rub my hand, and I'm just rub my forearm. And I'm just yo, what are you doing? And she'll just rub it. I'm my skin is not gonna just rub off or anything. And it's fascination. And
That's the thing. Like, call me ignorant. I'm pretty sure it's also ignorance. But in my mind, I'm just like, no, it's fascination. It's ignorance. It's them not knowing. And then
100%.
I didn't realize that it's more so oppression. And then, for example, you're talking about Stormzy. Where did I go? I was on vacation and I forgot what country. And I was with a friend at the time, that friend. And we were in a place and he was like, hey, waka waka. You remember that sound?
Oh, yes. Yes.
I was like, yeah. And I'm just like, okay, this is just ignorance. Should I be offended by this? And that's the thing, like, what's the solution, man? Because I was having a chat with a friend earlier and she was going on about how like the system is failing us, 1, 2, 3. How do we solve it? Because I'm a person who gets really frustrated when especially I'm talking about problems and issues. Hi, girl, where do we go from here?
Where do we go? I mean, girl, racism is a thing. It's a real issue and it's a living issue that I think when we start talking about what do we do about this, actually it's a difficult question to answer, but it's an easy question to answer. Like, it's a difficult question to answer because we are basically asking, how do we unroot something that has taken generations and generations
to develop,
centuries to be it's deeply woven into the fabric of and rooted into the fabric of society. It's not something that we can undo overnight. It's a complete re-education piece. It's like you need to set a reset on people's minds. We, as Black people, we can never delete our history. We can never delete what we experienced. But as a people, I think it's important that we start owning our own narrative. We start telling our own stories, that we find empowerment within ourselves.
I agree.
But even when I'm saying that it's important that we find our own power, it's only if we're allowed to. Because actually, like we've said, racism is about power and privilege. And the world currently doesn't feel like it's set up to allow Black people to win.
But I feel like the most important thing is changing the narrative, making sure that the conversations are had. Because like I had started off by saying, one problem I had was, it's not my problem, I'm not going to talk about it. When you do nothing or say nothing and you experience something and you don't vocalize it in fear, then you're allowing it to continue. Of course, you don't have to go about it the wrong way, but if you don't vocalize your thoughts or you don't show your displeasure, then no one is going to feel a need to change. So one thing I'm going to say is I applaud the Americans for what's going on. It's very sad that it's taken, viral videos for people to, and of course, like the Black Lives Matter movement has been going on forever. I'm not trying to discredit that, but it's sad that it has taken such viral imagery for the world to have this conversation as Black people. And I feel like as Africans, I want us to also have the conversation on how we empower each other, because we can't just focus. And I don't know, maybe I'm going on a tangent. What I want to say in conclusion is I don't want other Black people around the world to feel it's not your issue. It involves you.
Oh no, it's an issue for all of us, and it's not just. It's an issue, 100%. It's an issue for all of us. Africa, even within Africa, even though we say that racism is less of an issue, but it's there. It's there in a lot of ways, in the way in which, I think maybe the racism in Africa currently is that institutionalized racism. How we access aid, how we access loans from institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, trade agreements that are in place. There's a lot of racism that is going on that is keeping Africa down, and we need to confront that. The way that our people are being treated, Africa, the conversation about racism becomes more nuanced as well, because we start talking about things like xenophobia, tribalism, all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot. I think tackling racism isn't just a problem for Black people to tackle. It's a human problem. It's fundamentally, Black Lives Matter is about human rights. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
As human, like racism is a human issue, and it is for white people to tackle, Black people, Asian people, orange people, everybody. All of us have to tackle it as a collective. One thing that we've been talking about a lot at work is about, and a lot of I don't know if you've had these questions, Tracy, on your end, from your white or Asian colleagues coming up to you and like saying, "Oh wow, how can we help? What can I do?" And we've been having a lot of conversations around allyship, and basically, as allies, they don't always have the lived experience, so they don't always understand racism in the way that we understand it. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't educate themselves. Everybody has a responsibility to educate themselves about this issue. They need to educate them. There's books, there's blogs, there's so much out there just for people to learn not to be racist. And even when we talk about being anti-racist, ideological racism, interpersonal racism, institutional racism, and internalized racism, honestly, Tracy, all of this can be unlearned if you really have a true willingness to unlearn it. Black people, we can unlearn what we've gone through. We're traumatized as a people, but then we can work through that trauma and really unlearn it. I think it's an education piece.
I agree. And I feel like we should make sure that we keep having that conversation as Black people all over the world, allies as well. Have that conversation, get yourself educated. Guys, this affects all of us. Hey, that's what I'm going to say in conclusion. It's not going to change overnight, like you said initially, but it takes someone willing to sit down and try and make a change. As a collective, if one person does it and all people come together, then eventually someday it will be done.
Things will change. And to be honest, concluding comments from me as well is this isn't the first time that Black Lives Matter has sparked up. It's sparked up before. And what always happens, I know a lot of people are a little bit cynical because they'll be like, well, someone gets killed, we start to protest, we start screaming and shouting about it, then it all goes quiet again. But then something about this time feels different. Something about this time, the conversation is broader. This time it's less about police brutality, but it's about racism in general, and it's about racism around the world, not just in the US. Racism is a global issue. So I feel like there's a real moment right now, and as Black people and just as human beings, we really need to keep this momentum going. We need to keep having these conversations. We need to confront injustice, and we need to speak out. White people, allies, please, when you see something that's racist, speak out. We need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and have these conversations about racism. Africa, wake up. Not that you're not woke already, but wake up. We need to start fighting for just an equitable part of this world,
I know.
But yeah,
and I hear you.
There's never going to be a perfect answer. I know that this conversation that we've just had today, people have had it in like a million different ways over the past few weeks, over many, many years. We're not saying anything that's new or something or anything that people don't know, but
we hope it makes a change.
We hope
all you can do is.
Yeah, no. And if you I know a lot of our listeners are based in Africa, so it'd be really interesting to know, wherever you are in your part of the world, how you've experienced this last few weeks with everything that's happened, how you're feeling about it, and is it driving you to want to act? Is it driving you to want to advocate around this issue? But yeah,
I agree. Yeah, cool. Thanks, girl. It's been a good one. It's been a nice comeback episode. It's sad that so much is happening in the world, but I'm glad that it is, hey?
100%. It's actually it feels cathartic. I don't know if that's the right word for me. I'm currently Googling what cathartic means, guys. It feels... I've just used the word, but I don't know what it means. It feels... Did I use it right?
Hold on. Earlier you were saying kefa. What's a kefa?
Oh, kefa. You know how in South Africa they call a black person
Safar.
Yeah.
I was lost. I was like, what is this girl talking about? Hey, okay.
That. So yeah, no, I did use it right. Cathartic is that providing psychological relief through open expression of strong emotions. Yeah, basically, just talking about this is really cathartic. And I think what Sandra, one of the tribe, that session that she had a few weeks ago, that was really
the healing session.
The healing session. Black people, please, we are traumatized. We're going through a lot right now. If you do have those in your tribe that you can speak to and create a healing circle, please, I encourage you to do it because it helps. It really, really helps. We're going through a lot right now. We need a release. But
we need a support system. Yeah,
100%. On that note, thank you so much for joining today. We'd really love for you to let us know what you think. you can hit us up on Instagram at Hey Sis, I Need to Vent. And you can also post a voice note on Anchor FM at Hey Sis, I Need to Vent. Thank you so much for joining today. Look forward to you joining next time. Bye.